The desert was endless, a sea of burning sand under a heavy sun. The human traveler walked slowly, his boots sinking into the dry earth. He had been alone for many days, and silence was his only companion. His water supply was almost gone, his energy fading, yet he kept moving. Something in his heart told him that if he stopped, the desert would swallow him forever as he climbed a small dune. He noticed something strange in the distance. At first, it looked like nothing more than broken metal shining under the sunlight. But the shape did not belong to the desert. It stood upright, half buried in the sand. Like a forgotten relic, the traveler narrowed his eyes. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, curiosity pushed him forward. Step after step toward the strange object, when he got closer, he froze. It was not just broken metal, it was a cage, an iron cage. Rusted and covered with dirt, its bars twisted but still strong. The sight was shocking. What was a cage doing here in the middle of nowhere? And then he saw her. Inside the cage sat a young girl, her body covered with dust, her skin marked by the desert wind. She hugged herself tightly. Her arms crossed over her chest, shivering though the heat was cruel. Her hair was long and tangled. Shining faintly under the harsh sun, her face was delicate, beautiful, but filled with pain. Tears left trails on her cheeks, mixing with the dirt of her prison. She looked like she had been there for days, maybe longer. The traveler's heart skipped a beat. He stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "Are you alive?" he asked. The girl lifted her head slowly, her eyes opening just enough to look at him. They were not human eyes, they glowed faintly, like light trapped underwater. In that moment, the traveler understood. She was not from Earth. She was an alien. Her lips trembled, but no sound came out. She tried to speak, but only a broken whisper escaped. Her throat was too dry, her strength nearly gone. The traveler quickly pulled out his canteen. Shaking it, only a few drops of water remained. He knelt by the cage and held it out. "Here, drink," he said softly. The girl stared at the water, her eyes wide with both fear and hope. For a moment, she did not move. Then, with trembling hands, she reached out through the bars. She touched the canteen, her fingers delicate. Slowly, she brought it to her lips and drank. The traveler watched carefully. She swallowed the water in small sips, as if afraid it would vanish. When the last drop was gone, she leaned back against the bars, her eyes closing with relief. But the cage still held her. The traveler circled around it, touching the metal. It was ancient, but strong. The lock rusted, but not broken. He frowned. Who would put her here? Why leave her to die in the desert? The thought sent a chill through him. He looked again at the girl, her arms still wrapped around her thin body. She was weak, helpless, but her eyes told another story. They were eyes that had seen suffering, but also carried something deeper, something dangerous. The traveler felt it, though he could not explain. He whispered to himself, "This is wrong. No one deserves this." But even as he spoke, he felt the weight of his choice. Freeing her could mean trouble. Maybe she was dangerous. Maybe someone powerful had locked her here for a reason. And if they returned, would they punish him for interfering? The desert wind blew harder, carrying with it a faint sound. A sound that made the traveler's blood run cold. Voices far away, carried by the air. He turned, scanning the dunes, but saw nothing. When he looked back, the girl's lips parted, and she spoke her first clear word. "They." Her voice cracked, but her eyes were wide with terror. "They are coming." The traveler's breath caught in his throat. Who was coming? Hunters? Soldiers? Monsters? He looked at her again. This fragile creature locked in a cage, her tears shining like glass in the sunlight. He knew one thing for certain. If he left her, she would die. If he stayed, he might die too. But in that instant, he made his choice. He placed his hands firmly on the rusted bars and began to pull. The metal groaned loudly. Echoing across the desert, the girl flinched, her eyes darting to the horizon. The voices grew louder. Shadows moving in the distance. The traveler's muscles strained, his hands bleeding against the sharp rust. The cage resisted, but he refused to stop. Finally, with a scream of iron, one of the bars bent. He pulled harder, opening a gap. Just enough for her to crawl out. The girl looked at him with disbelief. He nodded. "Go, now," he urged. But before she could move, the sound of footsteps thundered across the sand. Shadows rose on the dunes, tall figures watching, their shapes unclear. The traveler's heart pounded. He had freed her. But what had he awakened? The girl stood at the edge of the broken cage, her bare feet sinking into the hot sand. Her body trembled, every step weak, every breath shallow. The human traveler kept his hand close, ready to catch her if she fell. For a moment, the desert was silent again, as if the world itself was watching. He could still feel the shadows moving on the dunes, but for now, they kept their distance. The girl looked at him with wide, glowing eyes. She did not speak, she did not even try. Her lips were dry, her throat cracked, and her voice broken. Yet her gaze said more than words ever could. It was a gaze full of fear, but also something deeper. A quiet plea. The traveler raised his hand slowly. Showing he meant no harm, he pointed to his chest. "Human," he said. Then he pointed at her, waiting for her to respond. The girl lowered her eyes. Her voice almost a whisper. "Lyra," she said at last. Her name, it seemed, was Lyra. The traveler nodded gently. "Lyra," he repeated. Making sure she understood he had heard, she stared at him, as if surprised that someone cared enough to remember her name for so long. Perhaps she had been only a prisoner, only a victim. Now she was someone again. The desert wind howled, throwing dust into the air. The traveler looked back at the cage, its bars twisted, broken from his effort. Why had she been left there? Why cage a girl and abandon her to die under the cruel sun? He wanted to ask her, but her silence was heavy. She pressed her arms around herself. Shivering though the heat was sharp, he reached into his pack, pulling out a thin blanket. It was rough and worn, but he draped it over her shoulders. For the first time, her eyes softened, her trembling slowed. As if the simple act of kindness reminded her of warmth she thought she had lost forever. The traveler offered his hand. "Come," he said, his voice low at first. She did not move. Then, slowly, she placed her small hand in his. Her skin was cold, too cold for the desert heat. He felt the weight of her suffering in that touch. She was alive, but only barely. Together they began to walk. Her steps were unsteady, her legs weak from being trapped for so long. The traveler supported her, guiding her across the sand. Each step away from the cage felt like a victory. But he could not shake the feeling that unseen eyes followed them every few minutes. He stopped and scanned the horizon. Nothing but sand and rock, yet the memory of those voices echoed in his mind. "They are coming," she had whispered. Her words haunted him. Who were they? And why did they want her locked away? The girl, Lyra, moved silently beside him. From time to time, she looked up at him, studying his face, as if trying to understand who he was and why he had helped her. She seemed ready to speak, but always stopped herself. Her silence was heavy. But her eyes spoke louder than words. They said thank you, but they also said danger. After some time, they reached the shadow of a tall rock formation. The traveler guided her to sit. She lowered herself slowly, her body too weak. He gave her a piece of dried food. She stared at it like she had not eaten in days. When she bit into it, her hands shook. Tears slid down her cheeks again. It was not just hunger. It was the shock of being treated like a living being once more. The traveler sat near her, his eyes scanning the horizon. He felt the weight of choice pressing harder. Should he continue helping her? Or should he leave her and save himself? He was a wanderer, alone, not a hero, not a soldier. And yet, something about her changed him. Something about her pain made him refuse to walk away. Finally, Lyra whispered again. Her voice was quiet. Broken, but clear enough to hear. They will not stop, she said, her eyes staring into the desert as if she could still see them. The traveler leaned closer. Who? He asked. Her lips trembled, her voice fading. Hunters. She said, her body shivered, and she wrapped the blanket tighter around herself. They put me in the cage. They want me dead. But not yet. The traveler's stomach turned. Hunters he had heard stories. Whispers of beings who captured others for experiments, or for profit. He never believed those stories. Until now, he looked at her with new fear. If she was hunted, then helping her meant he was hunted too. The desert wind howled louder, carrying the sound of movement again. He tightened his grip on his weapon, his heart beat faster, his eyes scanning the endless horizon. He could almost see them, dark figures moving behind the dunes. Waiting for the right moment, the girl noticed too, her eyes wide with panic. They are close, she whispered. The traveler's chest tightened. He had freed her, but now the real danger was coming. The cage was only the beginning. The sun began to sink lower, painting the desert sky with red and gold. The traveler stood near the rock formation, his eyes fixed on the horizon. Lyra sat close to him, wrapped in the blanket he had given her, her fragile form shivering even. In the heat, the silence between them was heavy. Filled with fear and unspoken questions, he could still hear the faint echo of voices on the wind. The hunters, as she called them, were near. Every shadow on the dunes made his chest tighten. Every whisper of the sand made his hand drift closer to his weapon. He knew it was only a matter of time before they showed themselves, and he knew. He had to make a choice. The girl had warned him. They will not stop, she had said. Her voice filled with terror. He looked at her now. Her glowing eyes half closed, her face pale and weak. She was no soldier, no fighter, just a girl broken by captivity. And yet, there was something about her that stirred something deep inside him. He had survived alone for years, never carrying anyone's burden but his own. But now, this alien girl was his burden. He paced back and forth, his boots grinding against the stone. Part of him screamed to leave her, if the hunters wanted her. Then giving her up would keep him alive. He could walk away now, disappear into the endless desert. It would be easier, safer. But every time he looked at her, her tears, at her thin hands clutching the blanket, he knew he could not do it. Lyra opened her eyes slowly. She watched him, her lips parting as if to speak. But no words came. Instead, she lowered her gaze as if ashamed, as if she already knew the weight of the choice he was carrying. Finally, he crouched beside her. Why? He asked, his voice quiet but firm. Why did they put you in that cage? For a moment, she said nothing. Then, in a voice no louder than a breath, she whispered, Because I am not what they want me to be. The traveler frowned. What does that mean? Her hands tightened around the blanket, her shoulders shaking. They fear me, she said. They fear what I might become. Before he could ask more, the sound of movement cut through the air. Sand shifted on the dunes, heavy footsteps drawing closer. The traveler's heart pounded. They were here. The hunters? He rose quickly, pulling Lyra to her feet. Her legs shook, and she nearly collapsed. But he held her steady, her eyes filled with panic. They will kill you if you stay, she whispered. They will kill us both. The traveler clenched his jaw. His mind raced with choices. If he left her here, maybe they would ignore him. Maybe they would only take her back. He could hide, survive, and forget. But the thought burned inside him. Leaving her would mean letting the hunters win, letting cruelty win. and he was tired of cruelty. He turned his eyes to Lyra. Her tears glistened in the dying light of the sun. She looked so fragile, so breakable. Yet inside her, there was a spark, something the hunters feared, something worth protecting. His decision was made. "No," he said firmly. "They don't get to take you again." Lyra's eyes widened in shock. She opened her mouth to argue, but the words caught in her throat. She had never heard anyone speak like that, not for her. Not in her defense. Her whole life had been cages. Pain, silence. Now, for the first time, someone chose her. The traveler adjusted the strap of his weapon and pulled her closer. "Stay behind me," he said. "Don't stop moving, no matter what happens." And then they came. Figures rose from the dunes like shadows made flesh, tall, armored bodies. Glinting in the fading light, their eyes burned with unnatural glow. Their weapons humming with deadly energy. The hunters had arrived. The traveler stood tall, his heart hammering, his hands tight around his weapon. There were too many of them. He knew he could not fight them all. But he could try. He could make them bleed for every step. And maybe, just maybe, he could buy Lyra enough time to escape. The hunters moved in silence, spreading across the sand like wolves circling prey. Their leader stepped forward, a towering figure with jagged armor and a mask that hid his face. His voice cut through the air, deep and cold. "Human," he said, "step aside. The girl is not yours." The traveler's chest tightened. He wanted to shout, to curse them, but his voice came out steady. "She's not yours either." The leader tilted his head, as if amused. "You don't understand what she is," he said. "She is dangerous. She is not meant for freedom. Hand her over, and we will let you live." The traveler glanced at Lyra. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear. But behind the fear, there was something else, a silent plea, a desperate hope. His choice was clear. He raised his weapon, his voice sharp as steel. "You'll have to kill me first." The hunters paused for the first time. They studied him not as prey, but as a man ready to fight. The leader's mask tilted again, the faintest sound of a laugh echoing from within. "So be it," the leader said, and with a signal of his hand, the hunters began to close in. The desert wind roared. Carrying the promise of battle, the traveler tightened his grip. The choice had been made. There was no turning back now. The desert had turned into a battlefield of silence. The hunters circled slowly, their armor glowing faintly in the dying light. Their shadows stretched long across the sand, dark fingers reaching for their prey. The traveler stood tall, Lyra behind him, clutching the blanket as if it were the last shield she had. The leader of the hunters did not move closer. He only watched, his mask reflecting the glow of the twin suns sinking on the horizon. Every breath of the traveler felt heavier. Every second stretched like a blade against his skin. The air was thick. He could almost hear their hearts beating, theirs, his and Lyra's. And then the first hunter stepped forward, a giant of a creature, carrying a spear-like weapon, humming with energy. The sand crunched under its boots as it closed in. The traveler lifted his rifle, his hand steady, though his chest burned with fear. The hunter lunged. The traveler fired. The desert exploded with light and sound. The shot hit the hunter's chest, sparks flying as the armor cracked, but the creature did not fall. It only staggered, growling like some beast born of nightmares. Lyra gasped, covering her mouth. The traveler cursed under his breath, firing again. This time the shot struck the creature's shoulder. Burning through the metal, the hunter roared, stumbling back, its weapon falling into the sand. The others shifted, their movements sharper now. The shadows around them thickened, as if the desert itself had joined their hunt. The traveler grabbed Lyra's hand, pulling her back toward the rocks. "We can't stay here," he hissed, Her legs trembled, but she forced herself to run. The blanket flew behind her like a torn flag as they scrambled through the sand. Another hunter raised a glowing weapon. The blast shot past them, hitting the rock wall. Stone shattered. Fragments raining down. Lyra cried out, shielding her head. The traveler threw himself over her, taking the brunt of the sand and dust. His ears rang, his body aching, but he forced himself up. The hunters moved like shadows in motion, fast and silent. Every time he turned, one seemed to appear from nowhere. The desert itself felt alive, full of eyes, full of whispers. It was as if they were being swallowed by the night. Lyra clutched his arm, her voice finally breaking. "They won't stop. They never stop," she whispered. Her eyes were wide with terror, glowing faintly in the darkness. The traveler met her gaze. "Then we keep moving," he said firmly. "Until they can't find us." He fired again. Striking another hunter in the leg, the creature roared, falling to its knees. The others slowed, regrouping. The leader raised his hand. And suddenly, all movement stopped. The hunters froze like statues, their eyes glowing brighter. The desert wind stilled, and the silence returned. The traveler's chest rose and fell. His breaths ragged, he aimed his rifle at the leader. But the leader only tilted his head, as if studying him. "You fight well, human," the leader said, his voice low and cold. "But you are blind," he pointed at Lyra. "She is not what you think. She is a weapon. She will destroy you. She will destroy everything." The traveler glanced at Lyra. Her face was pale, her body shaking, but her eyes pleaded. With him, she shook her head slowly. "No." She whispered, "I didn't choose this. I didn't want this." The leader's voice thundered again. "Give her to us, and you may leave this place alive. Refuse, and you die here." The traveler gritted his teeth. His hands tightened on his weapon. He looked at Lyra once more, saw her tears shining in the fading light, and then he shook his head. "She's not yours," he said. "She never will be." The leader's mask tilted, as if smiling beneath. "Then you have chosen death." The hunters moved again, faster than before. The traveler pulled Lyra behind the rocks, firing blindly into the sandstorm of shadows. Every shot lit up the desert. Every roar shook the air. But there were too many, too strong, too endless. A blast struck the rock near them, throwing both to the ground. The traveler rolled, pulling Lyra into his arms. Her breath was sharp, her body trembling against his chest. He could hear her heartbeat, racing like a trapped bird, and for a moment he thought it was the end. But then something changed. The air grew colder. The sand beneath them began to shift, swirling as if pulled by unseen hands. The hunters slowed, their glowing eyes narrowing. The leader took a step back, his mask turning toward Lyra. She was glowing. Her skin shimmered faintly, her eyes burning brighter than before. The air around her pulsed with invisible force. The traveler stared, shocked, as the sand lifted around her like a storm. Lyra's voice, trembling but strong, filled the air. "I don't want this, but I will not go back." The hunters froze. For the first time, the leader's voice faltered. "She is awakening," he whispered. The traveler looked at her, his mind spinning. What was she? What power did she carry that made even the hunters afraid? The sandstorm around them thickened, the night alive with energy. The traveler pulled her closer. Shielding her as best he could, the hunters drew back, forming a circle. Their weapons raised, but their steps uncertain, and the desert itself seemed to tremble. The shadows were watching, yes, but now, so was something else. Something inside Lyra that refused to be caged any longer. The desert shook as if alive. Sand lifted in waves around Lyra. Glowing faintly under the dying sun, the traveler shielded his eyes. Coughing as dust cut into his throat, the hunters stood back, their weapons raised but their steps cautious. Even they seemed wary of the strange force awakening inside the girl. Lyra clutched the blanket tight, her body trembling. She whispered under her breath, words the traveler did not understand. The sandstorm swirled faster, the air colder. For a moment, the hunters hesitated, their glowing eyes watching carefully. The leader barked a command, his voice sharp, "Take her." At once, two hunters leaped forward, moving faster than human eyes could follow. The traveler reacted instinctively, firing his rifle. The first blast hit one hunter in the chest, sparks flying as the armor cracked. The second swung its spear, but the swirling sand struck it like a wall. It stumbled back, roaring in anger. The traveler grabbed Lyra's hand, pulling her close. "We run," he shouted. She nodded weakly, her glow fading as if the effort drained her strength. Together, they stumbled into the desert, their feet sinking in the sand. The hunters roared behind them. Energy blasts cut through the night, striking the dunes. And exploding in flashes of light, the traveler ducked, dragging Lyra down with him as one shot burned past their heads. The heat singed his skin, the smell of melted sand filling the air. They scrambled up another dune, sliding down the other side. The desert stretched endlessly. No cover, no shelter. Only shifting sand and distant shadows. The traveler's chest burned with exhaustion. But he refused to stop. Every step was survival. Every step was one more chance to keep her free. Lyra struggled to keep up, her breath ragged, her legs buckled, and she fell to her knees. The traveler pulled her up again. "Stay with me," he urged. Her glowing eyes flickered, filled with both fear and determination. "I will try," she whispered. Behind them, the hunters closed in. Their armor gleamed in the moonlight, their weapons glowing brighter. They were relentless. Silent predators chasing prey across an empty world. The leader marched calmly behind them, watching like a hunter certain of victory. The traveler fired over his shoulder. The shots slowed the hunters but did not stop them. Each time one fell, it rose again, their armor thick, their strength unnatural. He knew they could not win in a fight. Escape was their only hope. Ahead, the desert shifted into jagged stone. Ruins rose from the sand-broken towers, shattered. Walls, a dead city buried long ago. The traveler's heart leaped. "Shelter," he breathed. He pulled Lyra toward the ruins, their only chance. The hunters fired again. Blasts striking the sand around them. Explosions lit the night, sending fire into the sky. The traveler shielded Lyra, forcing her forward. His lungs screamed, his muscles ached, but he refused to stop. At last, they reached the ruins. Slipping behind a crumbling wall, the traveler pressed Lyra against the stone, his body shielding. Hers, the hunters spread out, their footsteps echoing through the broken city. Their voices carried in the night, cold and cruel. "Run if you wish, human," the leader called. "It changes nothing. She is ours. She has always been ours." The traveler gritted his teeth. He reloaded his rifle, his hands steady, though his heart raced. Lyra grabbed his sleeve, her voice trembling. "You cannot fight them all," she whispered. "They will not stop. Unless I stop them." He turned to her, his eyes fierce. "No," he said, "you are not their weapon. You are not their prisoner anymore." Her eyes filled with tears. "Then what am I?" you asked. Her voice breaking, he hesitated. Then spoke firmly, "You are free. And I will keep you free, no matter the cost." Her lips parted, shocked by his words. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever seen her as more than a tool or a threat. For the first time, a spark of hope flickered inside her. But the hunters were closing in. Shadows moved through the ruins. Glowing eyes shining in the dark, the traveler pulled Lyra deeper into the crumbling streets. They slipped between broken walls, their footsteps echoing softly. Every corner could hide danger. Every shadow could hold death. Then, from above, a blast struck the wall beside them, stone shattered, debris raining down. The traveler pulled Lyra away. Just as the wall collapsed, dust filled the air, choking them both. The hunters were everywhere. They could not run forever. The traveler's mind raced. He had no plan, no strategy, only instinct. But instinct had kept him alive before. He pulled Lyra into a narrow passage between two fallen towers. The space was tight, forcing them close together. He pressed a finger to his lips, signaling her to stay silent. The hunters moved past, their heavy steps shaking the stone. For a moment, the world was still. Lyra pressed against him, her body trembling, her breath warm against his chest. He held her steady, his own heart pounding. If they were found, it would be the end. The leader's voice echoed through the ruins. You cannot hide forever, human. Every world we touch, every cage we build, it is always the same. She belongs to us. The traveler clenched his jaw. Not while I breathe, he thought. Not while I stand. The hunters spread out again, their voices fading as they searched deeper into the ruins. The traveler exhaled slowly. He met Lyra's glowing eyes. She whispered, "Why risk your life for me?" He answered quietly, "Because someone has to." And in the distance, beyond the ruins, the sound of water faintly echoed. An underground river, perhaps. Hope stirred. Maybe, just maybe, there was still a way to escape. The ruins were quiet now. Only the soft drip of water echoed through the broken stone walls. The traveler pressed his back against a crumbling pillar, holding his rifle tightly. Beside him, Lyra crouched low, her glowing eyes searching the shadows. The hunter's footsteps had faded into the distance, but he knew they were not gone. They were never gone. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was heavy, almost unbearable. Finally, the traveler broke it, his voice low and sharp. "Tell me the truth, Lyra," he said. "Why are they after you? What are you hiding from me?" Her head lowered, her hair falling over her face. Her thin hands tightened around the blanket. I did not want you to know," she whispered. Her voice trembled, weak but full of sorrow. "If you knew, you would leave me behind. Like all the others." The traveler's chest tightened. Her words struck him harder than any weapon could. "I saved you," he said firmly. "I broke your cage. I fought for you. Don't you dare think I would leave you." She looked up then, her eyes glowing brighter in the shadows. Tears shimmered in them, but behind the tears was something else, a light, a power she could not hide anymore. "They call me a weapon," she whispered, "and in some ways, they are right." The traveler stiffened. "What do you mean?" Lyra closed her eyes, her voice breaking as she confessed, "I was born different from my people. A mistake," they said. "My body carries energy that should not exist. It burns inside me, a storm I cannot always control. When I was a child, it destroyed everything around me. Houses, machines, even people." Her voice cracked and she hugged herself tighter. "They were afraid of me. They locked me away. And then, the hunters came. They wanted to use me, to turn me into a weapon for their wars." The traveler felt his blood run cold. The memory of the sandstorm flashed in his mind the way the desert itself had moved around her. It was not an illusion. It was real. She carried power that could bend the world. He whispered, almost to himself, "That's why they fear you." "And why they want you?" Lyra nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. "They say I am dangerous. They say I am cursed. And maybe they are right." Her voice lowered, filled with pain. "Every person who tried to help me, they died. Everyone who stood beside me was destroyed." She looked at him then, her voice trembling like a blade on the edge of breaking. "You should leave me too, before it happens again." The traveler's eyes hardened. He shook his head. Slowly, "No," he said. I don't care what you are. You're not their weapon. You're not their prisoner. And you're not alone anymore. Her breath caught. She stared at him. Unable to believe his words, her whole life had been cages and fear. Now here was a man who looked at her not as a curse, not as a weapon, but as a person. Her tears fell. Faster, but they were not only tears of sorrow, they were tears of hope before she could answer. The ground shook. The ruins trembled as heavy footsteps echoed again. The hunters were returning. Spreading through the broken city, their leaders. Voice carried through the night. You cannot hide, human. You cannot protect her from what she is. The traveler tightened his grip on his weapon. Lyra's hand trembled, glowing faintly with energy she could not control. The air around her pulsed. Small sparks flickering in the dust. She gasped, clutching her chest. I can't hold it back, she whispered. Her power was awakening again, wild and dangerous. The traveler grabbed her shoulders. His voice steady. Look at me, Lyra. Focus. You're not a weapon. You're more than that. Her eyes widened, glowing brighter. Her breath came in sharp bursts. I don't know how, she whispered. You will, he said firmly. Because I believe in you. For a moment, her trembling slowed, her eyes locked on his, steadying. The power inside her did not vanish, but it bent. It listened. As if his words anchored her storm, the hunters appeared again, moving between the broken walls. Their weapons glowed. Ready to strike, the leader stepped forward, his mask reflecting the moonlight. Do you still not see, human? He called. She will destroy you. She will destroy your kind. She cannot be controlled. The traveler raised his rifle. Then why are you so afraid of her? He shouted back. The leader did not answer. Instead, he raised his hand, and the hunters surged forward. The ruins shook with battle. Blasts of energy struck the walls, fire and dust filling the air. The traveler fired back, his shots sharp, each one slowing the enemy, but he was outnumbered. The hunters closed in, their glowing eyes burning with hunger. And then, Lyra screamed. Her body glowed brighter than the stars. The ground cracked beneath. Her stones lifting into the air. The hunters froze, their steps faltering. Even the leader hesitated, his mask turning toward her with sudden fear. The power burst from her like a wave. The ruins trembled, the air crackled, the hunters stumbled back as if struck by an invisible force. Their weapons sparked, their armor cracking. The traveler shielded his face from the light when he looked. Again, the hunters were retreating, dragging each other away. The leader's voice echoed one last time. She is awakening. And when she does, no one will be safe. And then they were gone. The night was silent once more. Lyra collapsed to her knees, her glow fading, her body shaking with exhaustion. The traveler caught her before she fell. Lowering her gently to the ground, her voice was weak, broken. You see now? You see what I am? He looked at her, his voice steady and sure. I see someone who has suffered enough. I see someone worth saving. Whatever you are, Lyra, you're not alone anymore. She stared at him, her glowing eyes softening. For the first time in her life, she let herself believe. Believe that maybe she was more than a weapon. Maybe she was something greater. Maybe she was free. The ruins lay in silence after the battle. The air smelled of smoke and scorched stone. The traveler sat against a broken wall, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. Beside him, Lyra rested, her head leaning against his shoulder. Her glow had faded, but faint sparks still shimmered under her skin. She looked weak, exhausted, yet strangely peaceful. The traveler studied her face. She looked so fragile, almost human, yet he knew she carried power strong enough to tear the world apart. The words of the hunter leader echoed in his mind. She is awakening, and when she does, no one will be safe. He clenched his fists, shaking the thought away. He had made his choice. He would not abandon her, no matter what. The moon rose higher, casting silver light over the ruined city. For a moment, the world seemed calm. To calm, the traveler's instincts whispered danger. He scanned the shadows, his rifle resting across his knees. "Why are you still here?" Lyra's voice broke the silence. She turned her glowing eyes toward him, soft but uncertain. "You know what I am now. You saw what I did. You heard their warning. And yet, you stay." The traveler looked back at her, his expression firm. "I stay because you're not what they say you are," he replied. "You're not their weapon. You're not their curse. You're a girl who deserves to be free. And I won't let them take that away." Her lips parted, trembling with emotion. Tears filled her eyes, but this time they were not only of fear or pain. They carried something. Knew something fragile but real. "Hope," she whispered. "No one has ever said that to me before." The traveler placed a hand gently over hers. "Well, someone had to be first," he said quietly, for the first time since he had found her. Lyra smiled. It was small, faint, but it lit her face like the moonlight. The traveler felt something stir in his chest, something he had not felt in years. But before he could speak again, the ground shook. The ruins trembled as a low rumble spread through the earth. Dust fell from the broken towers. Stones cracked under the strain. The traveler jumped to his feet, pulling Lyra up with him. "What now?" he muttered, scanning the dark horizon. And then they saw it, a glow on the far edge of the desert. Not from torches or weapons, but from engines, machines. Dozens of lights appeared, moving slowly toward the ruins. The sound of engines grew louder. Like a storm rolling closer, the traveler's stomach twisted. "They're bringing reinforcements," he said sharply. "Not just hunters on foot. They've brought machines of war." Lyra's face went pale. Her body trembled. Her voice barely a whisper. "They will not stop. Not until I am theirs." The traveler looked at her, his jaw tight. "Then we keep running," he said. "We find somewhere they can't follow. Somewhere safe." But even as he spoke, he knew the truth. There was no place safe from them. Not as long as they wanted her, and the more he saw of her power, the more he feared the hunters were right. If she could not control it, what then? They hurried deeper into the ruins, the sound of engines closing in. Shadows of great machines loomed on the horizon, towering walkers of metal and fire. The city of stone shook under their advance. The hunters were coming back, stronger than ever. The traveler guided Lyra down a narrow staircase into the heart of the ruins. They entered a cavern where water trickled from cracked stone. The underground river glowed faintly in the moonlight, pouring through broken ceilings. For the first time, they felt hidden. For the first time, they could breathe, but the peace lasted only moments. Above them, the roar of machines grew louder. The ground trembled with every step of the hunters' war machines. The walls cracked, the ruins groaned. Soon, the city itself would collapse under their hunt. Lyra clutched the traveler's arm. Her glowing eyes stared into the dark water. "There is a path here," she whispered. "The river runs far. It could lead us out." The traveler studied the river. It flowed into darkness, an unknown path. It could lead to safety, or it could lead to death. "We don't have a choice," he said. "They'll crush us if we stay here." He knelt, helping. Lyra stepped carefully into the water. It was cold, rushing past their legs. The current pulled hard, but he held her steady. Together, they followed the underground river into the shadows. Behind them, the city shook. The roar of hunters and machines thundered above. The leader's voice carried through the night one last time. "You can run, human. You can hide, but you cannot change what she is. One day, her power will break this world, and you with it." The traveler gritted his teeth. He pulled Lyra closer, guiding her deeper into the dark. His voice was steady. Even against the roar of the enemy, let them come. They'll never take her while I breathe. Lyra's eyes glowed in the darkness, filled with fear but also trust. For the first time, she believed his words. For the first time, she felt she was not alone. The water rushed faster, pulling them into the unknown. The ruins collapsed above, the hunters closing in. And then the river swallowed them whole, carrying them into darkness. The screen fades to black. The sound of rushing water echoing like a heartbeat, to be continued.